Now this week, new property taxes in the UK. What does it mean in the residential property world and what more pain can we expect? This is taken from the Independent and Guardian UK newspapers. What was basically the news? Is the UK about to get a brand new property tax after shelving her income tax hikes, which apparently she has done under pressure from the OBR? Rachel Reeves is now eyeing high value homes as the next target in one of her raft of tax changes. So basically, the key points are here. There was an income tax U-turn based on OBR forecasts saying that public finances were healthier than she thought. However, they're talking about a new property levy. Okay, previously discussed in the market wrap, it's basically a surcharge on high net value homes, which will focus largely in the southwest, I guess. Basically, it's 2.4 million homes in the council bands F to H could be revalued. 300,000 may face an extra charge. And to a certain extent, there's a certain logic in it, because if you've got a great big swanky house, then you are using more of the fees than the average house would be using. And it is the opposite to stealth tax, in that these taxes haven't changed for a long time and they are due for renewal. So there's a certain amount of logic behind. But on the back of that, they're going to increase that, but also they're not going to increase income tax, but they're going to freeze the threshold, which is again balancing out, because it's more taxation by stealth. Because if you stop increasing the allowance, more people are earning more and more money. I think it's 7% wage rises in the UK at the moment. So more people are getting into that sector, which means that more people pay tax. So it is a real tax. Threshold tax is stealth tax. Income tax will be frozen for at least 2 more years, but that will still bring in 7.5 billion, reducing take-home pay and directly impacting affordability on property. So it would appear that the government's got this new concept of smaller taxes, i.e. lots of minor tax raises, limits on salary sacrifice schemes, new EV taxes and other incremental measures. Now this has caused jitters in the markets. Gilt yields jumped as investors worried about a shift towards multiple small taxes and the signal it sends out from the government in its appetite for making tough decisions, which would appear they've now bottled it after getting such a shoeing, if you can use that colloquialism, for the large tax hikes we're talking about. This is leading to market volatility. Market volatility could hit mortgages. Bond market sell-offs will spike borrowing costs, which will filter through to mortgage rates and make it more expensive to borrow. So that's another thing that could affect the property market. This lack of direction, the dilly-dallying, and the 2 months of what will happen has also caused businesses to hold off spending, as well as property buyers. Andy Haldane, the Ford head of economics at the Bank of England, says Rachel Reeves was given a poor hand for sure, but she's played it very, very badly. The fear of where the axe will fall has stopped people spending. So people are worried about what's going to happen next week in the budget, because they've heard so much about it. It's been 2 months and you haven't had complete security like you have at the Bank of England for the Monetary Policy Committee decisions, and you haven't had a complete transparency, which often you get people talking about this is what may well happen. You just have something in the middle where there's been a leak every week. Nice, I like that a lot. So a leak every week, which has led to uncertainty and led to lack of confidence, and it does, in the government. The Institute of Fiscal Studies has warned that smaller, poorly designed taxes risk harming economic growth more than actually a single large-scale change, because there's so many. And if you listen to the end, you'll hear about our tax code in the UK. However, government message is unchanged. Expect more tax increases, trying to build a resilient public finance. But I mean, what's happened to spending cuts? Apparently, the productivity of the civil service has not improved over the last 10 years. It's still flat. Yet they're employing a huge amount of people. So that's poor. So how's this affected the residential property market? Well, if you look at the metrics, surprisingly little has changed. You'd have thought, as I just said, and Andy Haldane said, waiting for the axe to fall, people would be bottling it and worrying about the future. The main metrics that researchers like Savills, Knight Frank use to monitor the health of the housing market haven't really changed. Nationwide index suggests that annual house prices edged up very slightly to 2.4% in October, while the Bank of England tenders that mortgage approvals were also up in September. But as ever, these headlines do mask a lot of variation. Data from 20 CI tells us that in October, overall activity in the housing market was just 2% below the same month last year. However, over the £1 million market, it was down by 7.9%. And if you're lucky enough to have a property over 2 million, it was down by 16.4%. As we know, pressure at the top of the market is there, but we also know now that there's also a pent-up demand of people sitting down on their hands worrying what's going to go on and what will happen after the budget. And what will happen, there'll be a release in pent-up demand. So people will go out and start buying. So if you're selling your property, it's a great opportunity to do so. If you're buying, you can probably get some good bargains out there as people will lap up the new activity. What we really know, according to Mr. Haldane, is that the UK has a longer tax code than any other country in the world. So there's more taxes in the UK, and the tax booklet, so to speak, is bigger than any other country in the world, bar none. So we are living in the most convoluted, tax inefficient economy in the world, or buying and selling in that market at least. So overall, nothing's really changing on the market. I do believe there'll be a bump after the budget. You know, people always worry about things that never happen. 9 out of 10 things you worry about never happen. And as I always say to my kids, if you wait for every light to be red before green to be before you set off for school, how long will it take you to get there? You'll never get there. So it's really a case of looking at the reds and the greens and looking at whether it makes worthwhile buying decision to get in there. So that's generally the market wrap for this week. Let's look at some of the questions over the last week. We've got a gentleman, I think it's a gentleman, could either way, Ali Khan, 8594. Housing collapse in London has its obvious reasons. Why would someone now buy a home above $500,000 when the government has threatened extra taxes? You can try to incentivize more buying by swapping who pays the stamp, i.e. the buyer or the seller, but it makes no difference. We do not go out of our way to make taxed cows. True enough, however, you buy a property for £100,000 and it goes up by 5%, you made £5,000. You buy a property for £700,000, goes up by 10%, 5%, you've made £35,000 to £70,000. That's the difference. And depending on the sort of tenants you would get in for the sort of property you're trying to buy, has also got impacts. Is it a property that's going to appeal to the lower end of the market, in which case you might have a lot more management problems, or is it to the top end? So there's a lot more parts to that mechanism, Mr. Ali or Miss Ali Khan. But you're right, tax is becoming very punitive in the UK. Eternity accountants, don't sound quite professional, even with 4 million homes missing in the UK, spot on. And this is a question I'll ask you. Since what point are they missing? The Town and Country Planning Act of 1947. Strategic investment in rental property can still outperform many other classes as demand constantly outpaces supply. Attorney accountants, exactly what our philosophy is. You know, there's not enough property out there, too many people trying to rent, and it's baby boomers like me sitting on massive 700-room mansions that we won't give up because that's what we've built up over the years. So rental property is a great buying opportunity. Andrew Taylor, the property market is over. Sadly, people still believe in this falsehood. That's a generalization for sure. I mean, you look anywhere, look at PBSR, purpose-built student accommodation, PBSA, sorry, purpose-built student accommodation. You look at supported living, you look at commercials, houses and multiple occupancy. There's some great markets out there. If you buy, yes, a buy-to-let in potentially and not that great a location, it is well done and the tax is well high on it. You need to tax plan, look at how you're doing it and diversify into commercial, residential, HMOs, PBSA, all that sort of stuff. So I don't believe the property market is over. And once again, how many times have we heard over the years the property market's over? I've heard it loads of times. So there we go. That's the market wrap number 279. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you found it useful. Take care. Speak to you next week.